My brother forgot to pay me back for years, so I stopped reminding him. My older brother Jason has always been the kind of person who's very comfortable borrowing money. Paying it back, though, that part never seemed quite as important to him. Growing up, he was the charismatic one, the one who could talk his way into or out of almost anything. Teachers liked him, friends liked him. Even when he messed up, people usually laughed it off. I was the opposite, quiet, responsible, the one who followed rules and tried to stay out of trouble. Because of that, our parents always treated us a little differently. If Jason needed help, everyone stepped in immediately. If I needed help, the answer was usually, "You'll figure it out." And most of the time I did. The borrowing started small, $10 here, $20 there. Jason would say something like, "Hey man, can you spot me until Friday?" And since he was my brother, I didn't think much of it. He'd usually pay it back eventually. Not always on Friday, but eventually. At least in the beginning. The first time things got a little bigger was when I was 22. I had just started my first real job, nothing fancy. Entry-level IT support at a small company, but it paid well enough for someone fresh out of school. Jason called me one night sounding stressed. "Hey, I need a favor," he said. "What's up?" "My rent's due tomorrow and I'm a little short." "How short?" "About $300. $300 was a lot for me at the time, but he promised it was temporary. "I'll pay you back next paycheck," he said, so I transferred the money. 2 weeks passed, no repayment. A month passed, still nothing. Eventually I brought it up. "Hey, what happened with the money?" "Oh, right," Jason said. "Things have just been crazy lately. I'll get you next month." That was the first time I heard the phrase that would eventually drive me crazy. Next month. Next month came and went, then another. So eventually I stopped asking. Not because I didn't care, but because every conversation about money with Jason followed the exact same pattern. Step 1. He promised to pay me soon. Step 2. Something unexpected happened. Step 3. The repayment got delayed again. Over the next few years, the requests kept coming. Sometimes they were small, $50 for gas, $100 for groceries. Other times they were bigger, $500 for car repairs, $200 for a phone bill. Each time Jason acted like it was no big deal. "Just until my next paycheck. I'll send it right back. You know I've got you." But the money rarely came back, and when it did, it was usually months later. Sometimes only half of it. At first I tried keeping track. I had a note on my phone listing everything. Dates, amounts. Little descriptions like Jason, car repair, or Jason, rent help. But eventually the list got so long that it stopped being useful. By the time I turned 26, the total was somewhere around $3,000. Maybe more. The strange part was that Jason never seemed worried about it. Whenever we talked, he acted like everything was normal. We'd hang out, watch a game, grab food, and he'd casually mention things he was buying. New sneakers, concert tickets, a weekend trip with friends. Meanwhile, the money he owed me was just floating somewhere in the background. The moment things finally clicked for me happened at a family barbecue. My parents were hosting one of their big summer gatherings. Relatives everywhere. Kids running around. Music playing in the backyard. At one point I walked inside to grab a drink. Jason was in the kitchen talking to our cousin Mark. "I'm thinking about getting a new motorcycle," Jason was saying. Mark looked surprised. "Seriously?" "Yeah, I found one online for about $4,000. $4,000. I almost laughed when I heard that. Not because it was funny, but because Jason still owed me thousands. And yet here he was planning a motorcycle purchase like money was no issue. Later that afternoon, I pulled him aside. "Hey," I said, "can we talk about the money you owe me?" Jason sighed immediately. "Dude, are we really doing this today? It's been years." "I know, man. I'll get you back." "When?" "Soon." "You've been saying that for 3 years." He looked annoyed. "You know I'm good for it." That sentence stuck with me. You know I'm good for it, because the truth was, I didn't know that anymore. After that conversation, something shifted in my head. I realized I had been looking at the situation the wrong way. I kept expecting Jason to suddenly become responsible, to wake up one day and decide paying me back mattered. But the reality was simple. From Jason's perspective, the system was working perfectly. Whenever he needed money, I helped. Whenever I asked for repayment, he delayed. And nothing bad ever happened. So I decided to try something different. I stopped reminding him. Completely. No more texts, no more casual mentions. No more awkward conversations about money. If Jason brought it up, fine. But I wasn't going to chase him anymore. At first, nothing changed. Jason continued living his life normally. We still saw each other at family events, still hung out occasionally, and the topic of money never came up. But what Jason didn't realize was that I had also made another decision, a much bigger one. Because if he was comfortable forgetting about the money he owed me, I was about to start treating that debt very differently. And the best part? Jason wouldn't realize what was happening until it was way too late. After that barbecue conversation, I completely stopped bringing up the money Jason owed me. No reminders, no jokes about it, no awkward conversations. If he wanted to pretend the debt didn't exist, I was perfectly happy to let him believe that. But what Jason didn't realize was that I hadn't forgotten, not even a little. The first thing I did was go back to the notes on my phone. The list I had started years earlier. It was messy. Half the entries were vague. Jason, $100 groceries. Jason, $50 gas. Some of the older ones didn't even have dates anymore. But after going through everything carefully, I realized something. The number was bigger than I thought, a lot bigger. When I added it all up, Jason owed me just over $4,200. $4,200. And that was only what I had written down. There were probably a few things I had forgotten about completely. Now here's the important part. I wasn't planning to demand the money anymore, at least not directly. Because I had realized something about Jason. If I asked for repayment, he'd delay it forever. But if the situation changed in a way he couldn't control, that was different. About 2 months after the barbecue, Jason finally bought the motorcycle. I found out the same way everyone else did, through social media. There he was in a photo, standing next to a shiny black bike with a huge grin on his face. Caption: finally pulled the trigger. Underneath it were dozens of comments from friends. Congrats! That thing looks sick. Let's ride this weekend. I stared at the photo for a moment, then I laughed. Because Jason had just spent $4,000 on a motorcycle, while still owing me more than $4,000. A few weeks later, our parents announced they were planning a big family trip. Nothing fancy. Just a long weekend at a cabin by a lake. But the idea was that everyone would contribute a little money to cover the rental and food. At the next family dinner, my mom started going over the details. The cabin costs about $1,200 total, she said. So if everyone chips in a couple hundred, it should be easy. Everyone nodded. Except Jason. He leaned back in his chair. Actually, I might have to sit this one out. My mom frowned. Why? Money's a little tight right now. I almost choked on my drink. Money was tight. 2 weeks after buying a motorcycle, that's when I decided the timing was perfect. I waited until dinner was over and most people had left the table. Then I said something simple. Jason, can we talk for a second? He sighed like he always did when he expected a serious conversation. Sure. We stepped out onto the back porch. So, I said, I was thinking about the money you owe me. Jason immediately looked annoyed. Dude, come on. I thought we were past this. We are, I said calmly. I'm not asking you to pay it back right now. He relaxed slightly. Oh. But I did realize something. What? Well, you owe me about $4,200, he laughed. There's no way it's that much. I kept records. Still sounds high. Maybe, I said. But here's the thing. Jason crossed his arms. Okay. I'm not expecting you to hand over $4,000 tomorrow. Good. But since you're clearly spending money on other things. He raised an eyebrow, like motorcycles. He rolled his eyes. I figured we could set up something simple. Like what? A payment plan. Jason stared at me. You're serious? Very. How much? I shrugged. Nothing crazy. $200 a month. He thought about it for a moment. That would take almost 2 years. I'm aware. That's a long time. So was the last 4 years. For the first time in a long time, Jason didn't have a clever response. He just stood there thinking. Finally he sighed. Fine. Yeah, $200 a month. Starting when? Next month. And just like that, something amazing happened. Jason started paying me back. The first payment came right on time. $200. Then another the following month. Then another. At first I thought it might only last a few months. But surprisingly, Jason kept it going. Not perfectly. Sometimes he was a week late. Sometimes he complained about it. but the payments kept coming. One evening about 6 months later, we were watching a basketball game together. Jason leaned back on the couch and said something unexpected. You know, I kinda hate that motorcycle. I looked over. Why? Insurance is expensive. Maintenance too. And I barely ride it anymore. I smiled slightly. Sounds familiar. He shook his head. I probably should have paid you back before buying it. That would have been a good idea. Yeah. Then he laughed. Honestly, the payment plan might have been the best thing you ever did. How so? It forced me to actually deal with it. Over the next year, Jason slowly paid the entire debt back. Every last dollar. The final payment came almost 2 years after that barbecue. When he handed it to me, he said something I didn't expect. Thanks for not blowing up at me earlier. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? You could have made this a huge fight. Instead, you just handled it. And honestly, that's exactly why it worked. Because sometimes the best way to deal with someone who avoids responsibility isn't yelling, or arguing, or chasing them constantly. It's quietly changing the rules of the game. Jason eventually sold the motorcycle, paid off a few other debts. And these days, whenever he asks to borrow money, he adds one extra sentence at the end. I'll pay you back on Friday. And this time, he actually does.